The sun was just beginning to rise over the small African village of Mavenzi, painting the thatched rooftops gold and bronze. The air was thick with the scent of roasted maize and woods. Women carried baskets of fruit to the market, and laughter echoed between the clay walls of the village square. Among them was Amina, a young woman known for her bright smile and her sharper tongue. She worked at a small stall, selling beads and bracelets, her fingers quick and skilled. But when the day slowed and customers thinned, her favorite pastime began talking about others. She thinks she's better than us just because her husband bought her a new goat, Amina whispered one morning to her friend, Zuri, nodding toward another woman across the market. Zuri giggled, half amused and half scared. Amina, you shouldn't say such things. But Amina just smirked. It's only words. They don't hurt anyone. That same afternoon, a traveler passed through Mavenzia, tall old man with a walking stick carved from ebony wood. His robe was simple, but his eyes held the kind of wisdom that made people quiet when he spoke. He stopped at Amina's stall to buy a bracelet as she tied the string around his wrist. He asked softly, "Do you know what the wind carries?" Amina frowned, not understanding. "Dust, I suppose." He smiled faintly. "And words. Once you speak them, they fly never to return. Be careful what you send into the wind." Amina laughed awkwardly. "It's just gossip, old man. Everyone talks." But he looked into her eyes and said quietly, "Not everyone listens to the wind's revenge." That night, as Amina walked home, a strange silence filled the air. The wind rustled through the acacia trees like whispered voices. She shivered, though the air was warm. A faint sound like her own laughter echoed behind her. When she turned, no one was there. The next morning, rumors swept through the village. The same cruel words Amina had spoken, but twisted, exaggerated, and now aimed back at her. She said, "What about me?" gasped a neighbor. "I heard she's jealous of everyone," said another. By midday, Amina stood alone. People avoided her stall. Even Zuri turned away, afraid to be seen beside her. That evening, the traveler returned, standing by her empty stall. "The wind carried your words far, child," he said, "and they came back to you." Tears welled in Amina's eyes. "What do I do now?" she whispered. "Find the truth," he said gently, "and let your heart speak louder than your tongue." Amina bowed her head, ashamed. For the first time, her heart was heavy, not because of what others said about her, but because she finally understood what she had done. The wind passed again, softer this time, as if forgiving her. The next morning, Amina sat quietly at her stall, her eyes swollen from crying. The once busy market now seemed distant. Every voice sounded like an echo of her own mistakes. Even the birds above seemed to gossip, chirping her name in the wind. As the sun reached its peak, the old traveler appeared again, walking slowly with his ebony staff tapping against the dry earth. He stopped in front of her and placed a small leather bag on the table. "What is this?" Amina asked softly. He smiled. "A lesson." When she opened the bag, she found it full of feathers, delicate, colorful ones from many birds. "Tonight," the man said, "take this bag and place one feather on the doorstep of every house in this village." Amina frowned, confused. "Every house? But why?" He looked at her with kind eyes. "Do as I say, and you will understand." So, when the moon rose high and the village slept, Amina walked from hut to hut. She placed a feather on every doorstep, the night breeze tugging gently at her shawl. Some feathers floated away as she laid them down, but she pressed on her heart, heavy but obedient. By dawn, she returned to her stall, exhausted but curious. The traveler was waiting. "I did as you asked," she said. "Every house has a feather." He nodded slowly. "Good. Now, go and collect them back." Amina blinked in disbelief. "Collect them? But that's impossible. The wind has taken them. I don't even remember where each one landed." The old man's expression softened. "And so it is with gossip, child. Once your words have flown into the wind, you cannot take them back. You may regret, you may apologize, but the wind has already carried them far and wide." Amina's lips trembled. She sank to her knees, clutching the empty bag to her chest. "So what can I do now?" she whispered. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You cannot chase the feathers, but you can stop throwing them. You cannot silence the wind, but you can choose silence within yourself." For a long time, Amina sat still, feeling the full weight of his words. Around her, the market bustled with life again. She watched people talking and laughing, realizing how many words, good or bad, floated unseen through the air every day. She looked up at the sky, whispering a prayer only she could hear. "From today, may my voice heal, not harm." The traveler smiled faintly and began to walk away. "The wind listens," he said, tapping his staff softly against the ground. "It always does." Amina watched him disappear down the dusty road, the sound of his staff fading like the last echo of a forgotten rumor. That night, the village of Mavenzi was quiet. The wind moved gently through the trees, and for the first time, Amina felt peace, not because others forgave her, but because she had begun to forgive herself. Days turned into weeks, and the gossip that had once burned through the village of Mavenzi, like dry grass in the wind, slowly began to fade, replaced by whispers of curiosity about the change in Amina. She no longer lingered at the market corners, or joined the chatter that used to fill her mornings. Instead, she spent her days helping others, quietly mending an old woman's basket, giving her beads to children who could not afford toys, and fetching water for a blind man who lived near the river. At first, people watched her with suspicion, unsure if her new kindness was real or just a disguise for her guilt. But Amina did not seek their approval. She sought peace. The old traveler's words still echoed in her mind like a song carried by the wind. "You cannot chase the feathers, but you can stop throwing them." One morning, as the sun rose over the baobab trees, she saw a little girl crying near the market. Well, her clay pot had cracked, and the child feared returning home empty. Without a word, Amina took her own pot, filled it with cool, clear water, and handed it to the girl. The child's tears turned into a shy smile. "Thank you," she whispered. That smile stayed in Amina's heart all day, glowing brighter than any jewel she had ever sold. From that day on, she made it her mission to spread small acts of goodness, each one like a feather released not into the wind of harm, but into the breeze of hope. Slowly, the village began to notice. The same mouths that once spoke cruel words about her now spoke softly in admiration. "Amina has changed," they said. "Her heart is different now." One evening, as she was closing her stall, a woman she had once gossiped about approached her hesitantly. "Amina," she said, "I heard what you said about me months ago. It hurt me deeply, but I've seen how you live now. You remind me that even broken hearts can mend. Tears welled in Amina's eyes. I am sorry, she whispered. I was blind with pride, and my words were poison. The woman smiled gently. Then let us both heal. They embraced under the fading orange sky, and for the first time since her shame began, Amina felt truly forgiven. The next day, children followed her around the market, helping her sell beads, laughing, and calling her Mama Amina. Her laughter returned not the sharp, mocking sound it once was, but a soft, joyful melody that lifted spirits around her. The traveler never came back, but sometimes when the wind brushed against her cheek, she thought she could hear his voice. The wind carries more than words. Child, it carries hearts. And she would close her eyes, feeling the warmth of kindness ripple outward like circles in a pond, reaching places she would never see. In the heart of Mavenzi, where once her words had hurt, her silence and compassion now healed, and thus the gossip that had destroyed her name became the soil from which her new self grew stronger, humbler, and kinder than before. One evening, as the heavy clouds gathered above Mavenzi, the villagers hurried to secure their homes and stalls, sensing the coming storm. The air was thick and trembling, and a strange silence covered the market where laughter once lived. Amina looked up at the sky, her heart uneasy. She remembered the traveler's voice again. The wind listens. The wind now howled like a beast, bending the tall grass and shaking the baobab trees. She rushed to help the older women cover their fruit baskets, pulling children inside her small hut. Thunder cracked like the voice of the ancestors, and rain poured in furious sheets, washing the earth clean. When morning came, Mavenzi looked broken. The roofs were torn, the river had flooded, and several homes had been washed away. But amid the ruin, Amina saw something unexpected, small green shoots sprouting beside her stall, growing from a crack in the ground. She stared at it, drenched and trembling, and smiled. Even the storm plants seeds, she whispered. As days passed, Amina worked tirelessly to help her neighbors rebuild. She gathered wood, repaired roofs, and comforted mothers who had lost their harvest. Though her own stall was ruined, she shared what little she had left. Amina, one man said as she handed him food, why do you help so much when you have lost to? She smiled softly. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything: respect, peace, and kindness. If I can give someone back even a little of that, I must. Her words spread like the gentle sun after rain. The villagers began to follow her example, helping one another without being asked. Laughter returned to Mavenzi, not as noise, but as healing. The green shoot by her stall grew taller every day until it became a small tree with golden leaves that shimmered when the wind blew. The elders said it was a blessing tree, born from the tears of repentance and the strength of kindness. One night, Amina dreamt of the traveler again. He stood beside the glowing tree, his eyes filled with calm. You have learned, child, he said. The wind once carried your harm, but now it carries your healing. The storm that broke your life also planted your purpose. When she woke, she went outside and touched the young tree, feeling its roots strong in the soil. May my words from now on be seeds, she whispered, not storms. Her eyes lifted to the horizon, where the sun was breaking through the fading clouds, lighting the wet earth like fire. The people of Mavenzi gathered around her, not to gossip, but to plant seeds near the blessing tree. One promising to guard their tongues and grow their hearts. And when the wind moved through the branches, it sounded almost like laughter, soft, kind, and free. From that day, whenever the storm clouds gathered, Amina no longer feared them. She had learned that storms do not only destroy, they also reveal who we are. Many seasons passed in the village of Mavenzi, and Amina's name, once spoken with scorn, became a symbol of grace and forgiveness. The blessing tree near her stall had grown tall and strong, its golden leaves whispering softly each time the wind passed through. People said the wind no longer carried gossip through the market, it carried peace. One quiet afternoon, as Amina arranged her handmade beads beneath the shade of the tree, she noticed something floating gently toward her from the sky. It was a single feather, bright, white, and clean. Her breath caught in her throat as it landed on her palm, weightless but powerful. And for a moment, she remembered the leather bag of feathers the traveler had once given her. Her heart trembled. Could it be that one of those feathers had finally come home? She looked around, half expecting to see the old man's kind eyes watching her. But the market was silent, except for the murmur of traders and the laughter of children. She smiled faintly, realizing that the wind was returning her lesson, not her sin. Holding the feather close, she felt the memories of her past, the words she had once spoken carelessly, the shame that had followed, the pain that had shaped her heart into something gentler. She closed her eyes and whispered, "The wind forgives, too." That evening, as the sun sank low behind the hills, Amina gathered the villagers under the blessing tree. "When I was young and foolish," she began, "I threw feathers into the wind. I thought my words would vanish, but they came back to me with pain. Now, I know that the same wind that punishes also heals, if your heart is willing to change." She raised the feather for all to see. Let this remind us, our words are not just sounds. They are seeds, and one day they return to us. The villagers listened in silence, their faces touched by the golden light filtering through the tree's branches. Then, one by one, they began to speak, not in gossip, but in truth. A young man admitted how jealousy had poisoned his friendship. A mother confessed how anger had blinded her love. Even Zuri, Amina's old friend, stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I was afraid to stand by you when everyone turned against you," she said softly. "But I see now that courage is not in speaking, it is in listening." Amina took her hands and smiled. "We have all learned, my sister." Together, they tied the white feather to the highest branch of the tree, where it fluttered gently in the warm wind. That night, as the stars stretched across the African sky, the people of Mavenzi gathered around the tree and sang songs of forgiveness. The melody rose into the air like a prayer, carrying gratitude to the heavens. In her hut, Amina sat by the window, her face calm, her heart full. The wind passed again, soft and kind, brushing her cheek like an old friend. And though she could not see him, she knew the traveler was out there somewhere, smiling. The feather had returned not to remind her of her mistakes, but to honor how far she had come. Years passed in the village of Mavenzi, and the story of Amina and the feathers became a tale whispered by mothers to their children. A reminder that words, once spoken, could travel farther than the eye could see and linger longer than the heart might expect, but that the wind also carries lessons, redemption, and the echoes of kindness for those willing to change. Amina herself had grown into a wise woman, her once bright and playful tongue now tempered with compassion, her laughter soft and nurturing, a melody that lifted the spirits. And every morning she would walk through the market, greeting each neighbor with a warm smile, helping where she could, sharing stories of courage, humility, and the lessons she had learned from the old traveler who had vanished into legend long ago, yet whose presence seemed to linger in the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft sigh of the wind through the acacia trees. One day, a young boy approached her timidly, holding a tiny bundle of feathers he had found by the river, multicolored and delicate, and he asked Amina, "What should I do with these?" She knelt to his height, her eyes shining with quiet wisdom, and said, "Place them in the wind, but only with love and truth in your heart. For words and actions, like feathers, can either hurt or heal, and the wind remembers both." Inspired, the boy ran through the village, scattering the feathers in arcs that danced with sunlight, and the villagers stopped to watch, feeling an unusual warmth in their hearts, as if the air itself had been touched by something sacred. From that day on, Amina noticed small changes everywhere. The quarrels that once flared up in the market were soothed quickly by laughter. Gossip no longer poisoned the children's games, and kindness became contagious, moving quietly from one person to another, like invisible threads weaving the community into a tapestry stronger than fear or envy. And at night, when the golden moon bathed the blessing tree in soft light, Amina would sit beneath it, reflecting on her journey from pride to humility, from careless words to deliberate acts of love, knowing that the same wind that once carried her hurtful whispers back to her, now bore messages of healing and hope, carrying her story to faraway lands, inspiring travelers, merchants, and villagers alike to think before they speak, to choose patience, to plant seeds of compassion, and to understand that every word is a gift or a burden, that silence can sometimes speak louder than speech, and that the true measure of a person is not in how easily they judge, but in how readily they mend, forgive, and nurture the world around them. As the years wore on, children grew up singing songs of the feathered wind, and even strangers who visited Mavenzi felt the quiet magic of a village that had learned the secret of words. And Amina, now old and gray, would smile softly, her heart full, knowing she had finally understood the greatest lesson of all, that the wind remembers, and it rewards those who carry their hearts with honesty, humility, and love. And thus the story that began with whispers of gossip ended with a chorus of kindness that echoed through the African plains, timeless and eternal.